I've gotten a decent amount of new subscribers lately, and every time I post a video with this car, I get a lot of people asking how everything works as far as the motorcycle swap goes. So in this video, I'm going to be going over every detail of this car, inside and out. I'm going to show what I did, how I did it, and why I did it. I'm even going to put it up on a hoist and show everything from underneath as far as how I connected the output of the CBR1000 engine to the rear differential. So I'm going to start with the exterior of the car. So this is my 1999 Mazda Miata NB1 chassis code. I've owned this car for about 10 years now. I bought it from, I think, the second owner. It had like 42,000 miles on the chassis. It's probably got, I don't know, 45, 46 by now. I rarely drive it. I mainly just like to tinker with it. It used to be a turbo BP setup. That made north of 400 wheel horsepower. And now it has a 2008 Honda CBR1000 RR engine and transmission in it. You're going to notice pretty quick that the main theme of this car is weight reduction. That's one of the major reasons why this thing works so well. It is turbocharged right now, but when I first put the car together, it was NA and it weighed just over 1,500 pounds. So I'm going to show you guys just how I got it that light. Starting on the outside, you can see that I have no side mirrors. It's just a small thing, but you know, the old saying, ounces equal pounds. And then the wheel and tire package. The wheels are some Enkei RPF 1s, which are 14 by 7. They were like the lightest I could find at the time. I believe the wheels alone are under 10 pounds. And then I bought them, they already had these tires on it. So that's what I've been running. All the suspension and brakes and everything is all Miata stuff. Stock brakes, stock axles. I do have some Super Miata Techna coilovers on this car. Moving on to the back here. This is actually one of my favorite parts of the car. So I have the trunk on some pins here. You just depress these and open it up. And you can see that I have this whole bottom area cut out where the spare tire used to sit, and that's all for weight reduction. So I've removed the factory fuel tank, which used to sit in here. And then I just put this really thin steel sheet metal over it to kind of clean it up. And then here's my fuel cell that I built. It's out of thin wall aluminum. It's got a Deechworks DW200 fuel pump in there with a mechanical regulator that's boost referenced. And then these tubes here they're not really structural at all. It's just thin wall steel to kind of help support this rear bumper area. You can see the end of the exhaust system right here. And then I went ahead and drilled some Honda type speed holes in this rear bumper because I figure there's going to be a lot of air back here, and I didn't want this rear bumper to kind of have a parachute effect. So I'm hoping that, you know, maybe the air kind of travel up and through these holes. And then, like I said, I deleted the latch on the trunk, save a little weight. It's just on these pins. So you go ahead, close it like that. And then let's move on to the interior or the cockpit. Right here, you'll see that I have a fire extinguisher. Anytime I'm ever messing with the fuel system on a car, I like to have a fire extinguisher on board. You never know. It's such a cheap thing to have. I would hate to watch this thing burn down on the side of the road because I forgot to tighten an AN fitting or something like that. So that's that. Another part of the exterior too is this Project G bikini top. This is their black Stay Fast canvas. This car originally when I had it on the turbo BP setup, it had a paint matched hardtop on it. I actually sold that to help fund this project and also to save some weight. This bikini top, I don't think it looks as good as a hardtop, but it does save a fair amount of weight, and it still gives it a little bit better of a look versus just running straight convertible. And then the tube that it's resting on here in the back, you can see it goes across. I actually had a roll bar in here, a bolt-in roll bar, and same deal with the hardtop. I took that out to save weight and sold it to help fund this project. So this is just some thin wall steel purely to hold up the bikini top. That is not structural at all. It's the same safety level as if it were just a regular convertible. So that's the bikini top. Now let's get into the cabin. So right away, you'll notice the doors. I have this aluminum door panel, and these doors are gutted behind this panel. There's no metal, no glass. I have the corner glass removed that used to sit here. Obviously no speaker in the door, nothing like that. Again, that's all to save weight. And then these seats are a pair of Kirky 55 series drag racing seats that are hard mounted to the chassis. These were like the lightest I could find. Still running the factory seat belts, as you can see here. Now let's get inside. All right, so this is the view from inside the car. It's the stock NB1 dash that I actually cut right here in half, basically. It is flocked, and there is absolutely nothing behind it. It's all gutted. There's no HVAC in this car. Over here, I have my AEM air-fuel ratio gauge and a boost gauge because this car is turbocharged. I'm running the stock CBR1000 instrument cluster, Sparco suede steering wheel. This is my shifter that I made myself with just a lightweight Delrin shift knob on there. Factory parking brake still works. I like to keep that for safety. This is a Heeltech gear indicator. It's kind of fun to have in the car. Gives it that rally type feel. And then another thing that I really like about this car is that there's no Miata wiring in here. I have everything running off the motorcycle wiring, but I still have the Miata ignition key working. So you go here, accessory position, you can hear the fuel pump prime, cluster turns on, and then obviously the next position would be start. All right, here's a view under the dash. Like I said, there's not much going on. Just some wires, and you can see the dash bar up here, which is just holding the dash skin. Now let's move on to the engine bay. To access that, I just have the factory Miata hood cable. Pull that. Here's my hood support. And if you're familiar with Miatas, you'll see that I have some of the structure of the hood cut out, and that is due to my intake plenum being so high that it would have hit that support without cutting it out. And I actually had, when this was naturally aspirated, the factory airbox was much taller than this turbo plenum. I actually had a hole in the hood where that airbox was protruding through. But when I did the turbocharger setup, I went with this TTS plenum that's much shorter, and it was able to fit under a factory hood, which is pretty cool. So this is where all the magic happens. This, like I said, this is a 2008 CBR1000RR engine and transmission. Now, when I bought this bike, it had about, I think, 14,000 miles on it. I've put about 1,000 miles on the engine since. Like I said, I am going to put the car up on a hoist so you guys can see how this works from underneath. It's a little bit more clear. But basically, if you were on the bike, you'd be sitting, the fuel tank would kind of sit here. So the sprocket is right, well, the sprocket would be right there, that gold piece. But instead of driving a chain, now it drives that drive shaft. A couple details that I want to share from the engine bay about the car. This is running manual brakes. That's a Chase Bay's Miata kit. I have a Honda B Series radiator that I bought and heavily modified to make work for this engine. Chinese Garrett clone of a GT 2860 turbocharger. And then these headers I built originally when the car was NA to start. The exhaust came to here and then exited out this way through that hole in the bumper. And then when I decided to do the turbocharger on there, I just went from this V-band obviously up and feed the turbo there. And then the downpipe goes here and with that down towards that flex section under the drive shaft. Now, as far as the controls for this setup, I had to adapt the accelerator pedal, the clutch pedal, and the shifter. So for the accelerator pedal, that was probably the easiest part. I used the motorcycle throttle cable. You can see right here, comes down to the firewall, welded that nut on there, and then see if I can get a good shot of the pedal. You can see it's the stock Miata accelerator pedal, which I shortened a little bit. So when you depress the throttle, it just pulls that cable. Pretty simple setup. So now for the clutch, this motorcycle transmission uses a cable clutch, and you can see the cable right here, which pulls on this arm. So I actually used the factory CBR clutch cable, which comes here, up through here to the firewall. This is the adjuster that is on the CBR, which you can thread this out. I have a nut welded on the back side of the firewall, so you can thread this out to put your proper tension on it. And then on the inside, this is a factory Miata clutch pedal. It's hard to see up there, but it's just pulling on that cable. And then I also have this is a Miata clutch switch that I have wired into the CBR ECU, so you can actually start the car in gear just like the bike. Lastly, the shifter. I wanted a tall kind of rally style sequential shifter in here, so this is what I came up with. This base bolts to the factory Miata shifter location, and this just pivots on this bolt, and then it goes down and operates a rod, which I'll show you when the car's on the hoist. So that shifter operates this rod here. Now, my shifter is going forward and back like this. Well, I needed a way to turn that forward and backward motion into side-to-side motion, which controls the transmission side, which is here. you can see it wants to go left and right. So this is a bell crank setup that I made. It pivots here. There's some bearings in here. So when this rod goes in and out, you can see it wants to turn the transmission left and right. And it works really well. Okay, some other details. As far as the engine management goes, this is all the motorcycle wiring right here. So I got the fuse box. All these wires are going to the rear of the car for the brake lights and turn indicators. Then I have the starter relay right here. I have an anti-gravity CBR1000 battery. And then as the harness comes this way, instead of going up to the handlebars up here, it turns left and goes under my dash into the instrument cluster and the controls. So I have the Miata turn indicator switch working, and like I said, the ignition stuff all works. Now, this is the brains of the whole operation. This is the factory CBR1000 ECU. It looks a little messy. That's because I have an AEM piggyback spliced into a bunch of wires, which is how I'm adding extra fuel for the turbocharger system. Now, one of the major complexities of turbocharging this engine is actually the factory airbox. So you can't put positive pressure to the factory airbox. So I ended up buying this plenum from a company called TTS Performance that makes supercharger kits for these bikes. And this is actually a pretty complex piece because obviously this engine has 4 individual throttle bodies with their own velocity stacks that are located inside this. And then this is a secondary fuel rail on top right here that feeds 4 secondary fuel injectors that spray directly down into those velocity stacks. So this plenum allowed me to retain all of that factory stuff, but yet it gave me a 2.5-inch bead rolled inlet for the charge pipe. So you can see the primary injectors are on this fuel rail, which is post throttle bodies. And then, like I said, your secondaries here, which come on at about 5,500 RPM. To turbocharge this thing, it was actually pretty simple. Once I got this plenum on, I have my turbo hanging off this bar here. Intake, obviously, and then the charge pipe comes down there through the front mount intercooler. And then goes back up to the plenum. As far as tuning it for the additional airflow, it was actually really simple with this piggyback. So this engine was already running in speed density. There's a intake air temp sensor right here, and there's a map sensor right here. So, and another thing I noticed was there was no O2 sensor in the exhaust, meaning that this thing is always running in open loop. There's no closed loop feedback. So if I were to deliver more fuel to this engine, the factory ECU would not see that and try to correct it. So all I did was I took this map sensor and I wired it into my piggyback, and I clamped the voltage at atmospheric pressure. So the stock ECU never sees any voltage higher than atmospheric pressure. So when I'm wide open throttle, the ECU thinks it's still naturally aspirated, and then I'm interrupting the injector signal after the ECU sends it out. I'm interrupting it with this, and I'm holding the primary injectors open longer to deliver that additional fuel for the additional air. This is a internally wastegated turbo. I'm only running 5 pounds of boost, and this little 1 liter engine made 223 wheel horsepower. All right, that was after the first pull. You can see 223 horsepower, which in a 1,500 pound car with an aggressive final drive ratio, it kind of gets down. One more thing that I wanted to address too is when I turbocharge the engine and I put the ECUs and all this wiring up in the wiper cowl, a lot of people were saying, well, you know, that's going to get wet. That's where all the water goes from the windshield. But obviously I'm not driving this car when it's raining. I have no side glass in the car, basically no roof. This is a fair weather car. It's a toy basically that I drive on the weekends and whatnot. So it's just for fun. And like I said, it's never in those conditions. One more thing I wanted to add as far as electronics go. This little box here is called a Speedo Healer, and it's made by Heeltech Electronics. And they sell these for all different motorcycles, but what it's for is when people change their front and rear sprocket sizes on their bikes, the speedometer will be off. So all this little thing does here is it interrupts the vehicle speed sensor, and you can change values with these buttons. It's got a little readout and whatnot. But anyway, I use that to dial in my speedometer and get it correct for the actual GPS speed of the car. Right now, I'm gonna go ahead, put the car up on a hoist and show you guys everything underneath. But one more thing I wanted to share is the engine. I mounted it towards the driver's side of the car. And that's why I kind of had to bring the headers forward and around, because I pushed the engine so far this way that you can see it was just so tight. There was no way I was going to get them down and under the transmission tunnel. And the reason that I pushed the engine so far this way is because the output of the transmission is about here, which obviously normally on an engine would be directly in the middle. Since the output is already to the left, if I were to put this engine in the middle of the frame rails like you'd think, it would have made this drive shaft angle a lot worse. The drive shaft would have been like this, versus now there's not a lot of angle on it. And when I was originally designing this car, I was really worried about drive shaft angle and having vibrations and whatnot, because it's such a long drive shaft. Obviously the shaft is going from about here all the way back to the rear diff. It's probably over 6 feet of drive shaft. So I want to make sure I could get all those angles correct and have no vibrations or anything like that, which I succeeded. Like I said, there's no vibrations, no noise, nothing funny coming from the drive shaft. Also, the drive shaft, not only is it offset this way from the diff, but it's also higher than the diff. So I have multiple angles going on for the drive shaft. It's going down into the center of the car. All the angle of the drive shaft is on the front shaft, and then the rear shaft between the diff and the carrier bearing is straight. So basically the rear drive shaft is an extension of that differential until it hits the center carrier bearing, and then the angle starts and goes up towards the transmission. So this is in the trans tunnel of the car right now. This is technically the left side of the engine. If you were riding the bike, your left leg would be over here operating the shifter, and then your sprocket would be right here driving a chain out that way. So this is a sprocket to drive shaft adapter. As you can see, the drive shaft bolts here with a U-joint. Everything is really close in there, but nothing hits. So the engine, the transmission sends power back through this drive shaft. Got a drive shaft loop here, And then right here, kind of under the shifter, actually real quick, you can see the shifter linkage that I made that comes down from in the cabin. This rod, that rod comes forward and operates the shifter mechanism. See if I can, which is right here. And then, so that drive shaft goes back to a carrier bearing that I have crudely mounted in here with a MIG welder, so don't judge. This drive shaft actually started as a factory two-piece drive shaft of an E46 BMW. So it goes back to the stock Miata differential, and then I machined this flange on the Miata diff to accept the centering ring and bolt pattern of the BMW drive shaft. And then if you notice, normally the Miata drivetrain, the transmission would end about here, and it would have a power plant frame or PPF that comes from the transmission to the differential. Well, I don't have a Miata transmission, obviously, so I needed a way to hold the front of this differential up. And that's where I came up with this bracket here. It's pretty overbuilt, but basically it goes from the subframe to the subframe over there and picks up the PPF. As you can see, the PPF is still actually in there. I just cut it right about there. That's the differential situation. It's a Miata factory Torsen differential with a M factory 3.3 ring and pinion in it. And then moving back, the whole trunk area is cut out, like where the spare tire used to sit. That's all to save weight. This is just thin wall tubing that's kind of holding the rear bumper and the rear trunk lid and all that. And then the exhaust system here, it just goes, this is the downpipe off the turbo, comes down here to a flex section, mounts to my drive shaft loop, continues back with a V-van flange, and then it goes over the subframe next to the diff and comes out here, uses one of the factory Miata hangers there, and then I added a hanger right there. So yeah, that's the underneath of the car. I know a lot of people want to know about the drive shaft and chain drive and all that. So up front here, a lot going on. You can see the exhaust that comes around. See, the exhaust when I was NA used to come off the headers here and exit through that hole in the bumper, and then I went turbo and kept the same headers. They just come here and go up and feed the turbocharger. This subframe to mount the CBR1000 engine is actually a mountless subframe from V8 Roadsters. So I bought that, and what it does is it bolts to the chassis at the frame rails, and then it locates all your suspension points, lower control arms, upper control arms. It locates the steering rack for you. But it's all tubular and there's no mounts. So I went ahead and I positioned the engine where I wanted it for ground clearance, drive shaft angle, hood clearance, etc. And then I went ahead and built 4 mounts. Here's one right there, which through bolts. You can see the bolt right there to that mount, which comes back, catches this bar that I added in. So this bar goes side to side in the car over here. Basically the purpose of this bar is to catch this mount. And then on the driver's side, I have this mount that comes all the way from the subframe up and grabs a bolt on the engine there. Driver side rear engine mount from above, and you can see it was really close to the firewall, so I had to pound back the firewall and kind of cut this little section here. And then funny enough, I didn't know how I was gonna have access to the bolt that goes through here, so I just drilled a 1-inch hole through the firewall there so I can go inside the car with a socket on an extension. And it's right, you can see the bolt, easy access to that bolt. And then the front driver's side is a little more crude, but it basically comes out here. It's gusseted horizontal, or it's gusseted diagonally there, comes up and grabs the other threaded portion on the engine block right there. And that's how I mounted the engine. This is the oil pan. Notice how deep it is. I'm pretty sure that's for motorcycle stuff, as far as lateral acceleration and wheelies and all that. It's got a really deep sump, helps keep the oil in there. I do think if I wanted to track this car maybe and put some high G-forces on it, I might have to do some sort of dry sump or anything, but I don't really plan on doing that. It's just a street car, so it's not really subjected to that high of G-forces, so the stock oiling system is fine for now. So that's gonna wrap up the breakdown of my CBR swapped Miata. I tried to think of every detail I could. I might overlay some stuff when I'm editing the video, but let me know in the comments if there's anything, if there's any other stuff that you would like to know, if you have any questions on how I did this, or any suggestions for how I could make it better. Put those down in the comments. Appreciate you guys watching. I'll see you on the next one.